Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and clinical psychology, I today wish to talk about how our body talks to us about our emotional state. How our body is the first and the last frontier to start revealing to us about our emotional state, about our emotional and our psychological pains. And since we are biopsychosocial creatures, which includes our biology, our psychology, and our social connections, it quite naturally is also telling us not only about the pains or the distress of our psychology, but rather to a large degree it's also telling us about the pains and the distresses of our social connections as well. For we need to take all of those three into accounts when we talk about ourselves. And so in order to begin this, I'd like to begin with myself. Paying attention to what my body was trying to tell me before it got out of control. And many a times, many of us do not take the time out, do not give ourselves enough time to pay attention to our body when it's actually talking to us in very subtle ways, in ways in which it is still not highly aggravated and aggressive, in ways in which it is gently nudging us, gently tapping onto some of our body parts, and asking us to pay attention, to listen, to address the issue before it gets distressing. So just a few days back, I suffered from cold and sore throat. Now it was also one of those very, very rare instances, particularly with me, wherein I started to feel a little pressure in my ears as well. Now when I get cold, it really doesn't happen very often with me that my ears kind of begin to feel a little blocked. But this time it did happen. So what was my body trying to tell me? What was my body trying to reveal to me? Well, if you look at the word cold itself, it shows a lack of warmth. And so why is there a lack of warmth? Well, generally a lack of warmth is experienced when we are not able to have compassion for ourselves and for others. A lack of warmth is also felt when we experience anger and resentment, at least to a degree, both on personal and on interpersonal levels. I also mentioned that I was dealing with sore throat. Now, when I talk about a sore throat, ya gala bet jana, it invariably tells us that I was not authentically expressing myself the places where I needed to do that. I was suppressing something within me that needed to be expressed, of course, in a healthy way. Quite naturally, इसके लिए तो गला बैठा था. Because it is through the throat that we express, that we verbalize, that we communicate, that we connect. And it is only when we shut down, when we repress that and when we suppress that and do not voice it out in healthy ways, does it express itself in physical manifestation. I also mentioned that it was one of those very rare instances wherein I felt some pressure, little pressure in my ears. It was also telling me that I wasn't willing to listen to something that I probably needed to pay attention to. And in a way, since the entire system, the ENT, the ear, nose, the throat, is all connected, and at the same time, quite literally, quite physically, since the ears are the two organs that are placed exactly at the sides of our brain to balance it out, to kind of do the balancing act. It also tells us that my brain was not in a coherent, in a harmonized state. And thankfully enough, since I've started to pay attention to my body and what it's trying to tell me, I was able to look into it. I was able to reflect on it. I was able to express it, to vent it out, to give it a voice, and then even objectively see it as my subjective experience through the art of journaling, and also sharing the same with few other people. And thankfully, what used to earlier take at least a few days for my voice to be restored, for the cold symptoms to go away. It lasted only for a couple of days this time around. Now, taking my own example, let's even take it a step back to kind of reveal the history, the story of it all. Before having this cold and the sore throat, I was beginning to experience neck stiffness as well. And if we quite literally look at our neck, it is that part of us, it is that part of the body that joins our head with the rest of the body, joins our brain with the rest of the body. And when I say that I was experiencing neck stiffness, which kind of feels like that my neck is stuck and really can't move a lot, which then translates into body stiffness and head stiffness and brain stiffness as well, gives us an idea that I was not able to have at that point in time, quite literally and metaphorically, a 180-degree vision, or even more than a 180-degree vision. I was having a very narrow focus and a very restricted and a narrow point of view, which of course naturally wasn't working very well for me. And having journaled about it and having talked about it, alongside doing some physical activities like body tapping, head tapping, stretching movements, properly relaxing, taking a little time out from situations, from people, from circumstances that was causing the anger reactions, the stiff reaction, the resentment, to be able to pause and reflect on it and process it, thereby address it, helped release the stiffness, the pain that I was experiencing in my neck, which had then transpired, which had then moved into the unease in the throat, the ear, and the nose, invariably the brain as well. And since we are social creatures, we cannot escape the fact that for a few days it was even entering the social spaces as well. But noticing that and mindfully addressing that prevented the distress to be aggravated, both on personal and on interpersonal levels. So our body is constantly talking to us. It is the first and the last frontier. The first one when it gently talks to us. The last one when it needs to talk in aggressive and aggravated ways. So before we do that to ourselves or our body does that for us, let's try and look at a few other symptoms as to how it shows our emotional states. So let's say if somebody is having to deal with anemia, or if somebody calls themselves anemic, what exactly is their body trying to tell them about their emotional state, about their social state, about their relationship state? For we need to keep reminding ourselves that we are interactive biopsychosocial creatures. So when we say anemia, it's lack of hemoglobin in the blood, invariably pointing out towards iron deficiency, quite literally telling us that there is a lack of iron will, a firm will, not a rigid will, a firm willingness to live, not a rigid willingness to live, but it's just having the willpower to have your authentic ownership over your own life decisions, over your own life choices, which invariably and quite unfortunately, but very directly points towards self-abandonment and self-rejection. The lack of willingness to be a participant in your own life, to take ownership of your own experiences, of your own joys, of your own color in life, or of the colors in your life. Because very often than not, people who experience anemia also tend to have paler skin or darker skin, at least in some areas of the body or the face. And quite naturally, it's indicative of the lack of color in life, of the lack of oxygen in life, which quite literally supports us, which quite literally keeps us alive. And in a way, it's reflective of our social connections, of our social support as well. Let's take another symptom of thyroid gland being overactive or being underactive as hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism. Now, if you quite literally look at the placement of the thyroid gland in the body, It is placed near the throat area. And as I mentioned earlier, the throat is the place from where we give ourselves an expression, from where we voice out our thoughts, our feelings, from where we communicate, from where we connect, from where we give ourselves an expression, from where we believe that our thoughts have a place to exist and to stand. And somewhere when we believe, when we feel agitated, that it doesn't have a right to exist that way, the thyroid gland either overreacts or suppresses itself. And both of the extreme ends causes more distress, causes more damage, causes more unease and dis-ease, not just on a personal level, but even within our interpersonal relationships as well. Now, if we have back or shoulder problems on most days, either stiffness or pain or not feeling strong enough, the body is metaphorically trying to tell us, it's speaking to us, telling us that you are quite literally carrying the weight of the world on your back and on your shoulders. And maybe it's time to look into that. Are we deliberately, consciously doing it? Or is it happening at a more unconscious level? Because I was also somebody a few years back who used to deal with a lot of back stiffness and leg stiffness. And I quite literally felt the weight of my own expectations and the weight of the world weighing down on my back and on my shoulders. And when I mentioned leg, the stiff leg, it also talks about, or rather any kind of stiffness also talks about stiff beliefs, rigid beliefs, inflexible attitude towards life. And the stiffness or the rigidity of the leg muscles can also indicate our inability to move ahead in life with agility, with flexibility. Somewhere it quite naturally feels that we are at war with the rest of the world, which quite naturally affects our interpersonal relationships. And having weak muscles or weakness in the leg is also reflective about us not being able to stand for what we want to do, for what decisions we wish to make, for the choices that we wish to make. It's quite literally indicating that we are not able to have a stand for ourselves. We are not able to take a stand for ourselves. Now, if there are any problems with regards to our eye or our eyesight, it quite naturally reveals our inability to see things clearly, to see things realistically, to accept them realistically. We might be denying a lot of our reality, which is why it's quite even difficult to have any kind of an objective insight. So maybe the question then might be, what am I not willing to see? What am I afraid to see, which I think will cause a pain that I feel I'll not be able to tolerate, that I feel that I'll have no support around that will help me deal with it? What is my reality that's so scary for me to see? Now, if you've been dealing with weight issues, a little too much of it, or maybe not enough of the weight, you might feel unsafe in the world. You might feel undernourished. You might feel unsupported, not just in your world, but even in your interpersonal relationships. For an excess weight is like you carrying lots of blanket around you, over you, trying to protect yourself from the world, trying to protect yourself from the cold reality of the world, which is how you experience the world to be. So invariably, your body manifests itself by adding layers over it, so that on some level you can convince yourself that you're wearing so many layers of clothing that nobody can harm you, that nobody can touch you, that nobody can really see you, that nobody can really reach up to you. On the other hand, if any kind of a weight gain is your problem, like you're not able to gain enough weight, you might be feeling deprioritized, undernourished, deprived, in love, in nourishment, in care, in support, both on a personal and on interpersonal level. Now let's consider another physical manifestation with regards to teeth. Now if you're having pains or problems or concerns or distress with regards to our teeth, Quite naturally, they are talking about teething problems. Now, teething problems for all of us essentially happens in the earliest years of our lives. When as little babies, when a new tooth is erupting, when a new tooth is coming out, we start to feel the pain. We salivate a lot more. We want to grab onto anything and put it in our mouth to ease off the pain, to ease off the distress caused by the teething problem. Now, quite naturally, when those teething problems in the earliest years are happening, we also have digestive issue problems because we're trying to put everything in our mouth or trying to put things that are not appropriate for the mouth to ease off the pain, quite naturally resulting in a distressed digestive system as well, at least for a period of time. And through the similar lens, if we can look at it, we'll understand that many of our teething problem or problems related to our teeth, even in the later years of our lives, are with regards to us not being able to grasp the ideas between our teeth, in our mouth, in our heads, in our brains. It's not being able to grasp the ideas and break it down into bite sized, digestible pieces. It shows our inability to bite down and chew onto the ideas, the circumstances of our life that present before us. Now let's consider another example, diabetes, which most people, at least in India, also refer to as sugar problems. And if I were to go backward exactly in that order, sugar issues or sugar resistance. Well, sugar is naturally related to sweetness in life, sweetness in relationships, sweetness with relationship to ourself, sweetness with regards to our belief systems. And if we have any kind of a sugar problem, which has manifested or has started to manifest as a disease, dis-ease, both on personal and on interpersonal levels, it in a way is telling us that we have a belief wherein we are resistant to any kind of sweetness in life, to any kind of real joy and real connection in life. That be careful, if you're laughing a lot right now, you might end up crying a lot more later. And in order to not experience sadness later, and in order to not experience disappointment later, I might be resisting connection and joy right now. There might also be an underlying unconscious belief that if the person that I loved most in my life was not so happy in life, how can I give myself the permission to experience joy and sweetness and happiness in life? And of course, these beliefs are happening at a very unconscious level. That if we were consciously aware about, we might be making very different choices in life. We might be living a very different life altogether as well. Let's consider another very common example of people snoring. Now, the natural logical question to ask is as to why do people snore? Well, there's something blocked in the nose. And of course, there's something blocked in the nasal passage, in the respiratory passage as well, which kind of talks about the inflow and the outflow of the oxygen and the carbon dioxide in our respiratory passage. In a way, metaphorically, symbolically telling us that probably our respiratory system is resisting the support of oxygen. And on another level, resisting the support of the supportive system that we have around us. Well, snoring also happens when our neck region is tightened, when our neck muscles are tightened, when they aren't relaxed. And when anything is not relaxed, it's inflamed, it's constricted. And in a way, we then can correlate it with the earlier examples of neck stiffness, of neck tension, of shoulder tension, of back tension that I talked about earlier. And in a way, snoring also represents our inability to express ourselves, our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts when in the awake state. And since the body never lies, when we are asleep, it is trying to talk through us. It is trying to talk for us. And in a way saying, can you hear me now? Will you listen to me now? Am I audible now? And on the other level, it also points to another factor, that it's trying to push some people away, trying to keep some people away, because quite naturally, the sound of the snoring causes enough disturbance during the sleeping hours that the other people are left with no other choice but to leave you alone, to give you your own space, which probably in your waking up moments you're not able to express. And it's not just the physical space that we are talking about, it's also about the mental space that we have not been able to claim for ourselves, that our snoring is trying to do for us. And of course, there can be environmental and genetic components to our distresses and our diseases. This eases, both on personal and on interpersonal level, once again, just as a reminder. So, of course, there can be those factors as well. But then science also today tells us that a lot of these diseases are reversible, despite having some amount of genetic influence. It somewhere also tells us about the choices that we have in hand, that we have at our disposal and our capacity. And all of those choices and those capacities can be availed of, or at least the degree of them can be availed of, only when we are aware. We can only get aware when we pay attention. Due, deliberate, diligent attention. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, we might consciously be paying attention to very few things, to very little things. But our subconscious and our unconscious is attentive all the time to everything that's happening around us, that's happening within us. And it is happening for us, only if we let that happen for us. And since the body never lies, for the lie detector tests happens through the body, and since the body keeps the scores of everything that goes on within ourselves and around us, we need to start paying attention to what it's trying to say to us. We need to start paying attention to what it's trying to tell us, to what it's trying to reveal about us. And as I mentioned earlier, once we start noticing, once we begin to pay attention even to those little nudges, we need to be able to address them, either by talking to somebody, giving it a space to exist, venting it out of our system, releasing it out of our system, by journaling about it. Because thankfully, our diary never talks back to us. It gives us a space to hold everything that we experience. By body tapping, and I will be attaching a few links with regards to body tapping along with this video, which you can look into if you want. By grounding works, through yoga, through breath work, through meditation, through boxing, through taekwondo, through kickboxing, through any kind of a physical movement, through dance therapy, through shaking it out like how animals do after they move out of the danger zone. They quite literally shake up their bodies to release, to let go of whatever emotion was being held in the body, so that emotion doesn't start to distress you. And even medication, if required be, to a degree, by talking to a counselor, by talking to a therapist. So let's pay attention to the little taps, the little nudges that our body is trying to talk to us about, to provide some information, some knowledge that we might be trying to ignore. Let's try to listen to the voice of our body before it has to start making loud noises. So then let's try and pay a little more attention to those gentle nudges, to those gentle taps, the little taps that our body is trying to tell us. Before it has to shout and scream, before it has to get aggravated and aggressive, before it has to break down, for us to pay attention to what it had been trying to speak all along. For the body never lies and it always keeps a score. Let's try and remember that. Let's try and see what our body is telling us about ourselves, about our emotional states, about our emotional health, about our relational health, about our relationship with ourselves. Let's look into that, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do share, like, and subscribe.